Generally, we don't bother to read the at former President Donald Trump's deranged posts on social media. But this one is so unstable and so unhinged, it's important that Americans maybe know just how imbalanced the Republican nominee is. So here goes. Trump writes in full, quote, "This is the most radical left duo in American history. There has never been anything like it, and there never will be again. Crazy Kamala is indeed crazy. I hear there is a big movement to bring back Crooked Joe. What are the chances that Crooked Joe Biden, the worst president in the history of the U.S., whose presidency was unconstitutionally stolen from him by Kamala, Barack Hussein Obama, crazy Nancy Pelosi, shifty Adam Schiff, crying Chuck Schumer, and others on the lunatic left, crashes the Democratic National Convention and tries to take back the nomination, beginning with challenging me to another debate. He feels that he made a historically tragic mistake by handing over the U.S. presidency, a coup, to the people in the world he most hates, and he wants it back now."
So Charlie, campaigns are about contrasts, and that's exactly what I was saying before. There are issues to go after Tim Walz on if you're a conservative, and yet Donald Trump, as the Wall Street Journal editorial page always says, never provides that space because he's always doing things like that. But what a split screen if you are a suburban voter and outside of Milwaukee, outside of Detroit, outside of Philly, outside of Atlanta. If you're in the northern suburbs of Atlanta and you didn't vote for Trump in 2020, but you think you might in 2024, there's your split screen. Look at them smiling on stage. Look at the fun. Look at the screaming crowds. It looks like winners. And I will say, as a Republican, and you were a former Republican, I was a former Republican, I'm not used to Democrats looking like winners. They're usually in a crouched position. They're usually scared of their own shadow, the exception being Barack Obama. But again, the visuals yesterday were striking, and compare that with Donald Trump's lonely rants on Truth Social. That is a striking contrast, is it not, for suburban swing voters?
It is a striking contrast, and it's also important context. I want to go back to something that Mike Barnicle said. You know, you look at Tim Walz, and he's not a scary guy. You know, I was thinking about what it was about him that was sort of, you know, hitting me, and it was like, I know this guy. A lot of people, you know, in a place like Wisconsin, know that guy. They had that guy as their coach. They know that guy from down the street. He talks like them, and I think that's going to be very, very powerful. You know, you may disagree with him on policy, but he's going to explain it in terms that you understand. But I'm so glad that you brought up this post by Donald Trump, this gibbering nonsense. I mean, can we just say it? This man is not well. So while we're talking about, you know, the policies of the Democratic ticket, you know, take a deep breath and recognize that the former president of the United States is having this cognitive mental breakdown in real time. In plain view. I mean, what is that paranoid maundering that he's going on about? And this new nickname, which is not a typo, the Kamala. I mean, I'm sorry, Joe and Mika, what the hell is that? What does he think he's doing? I mean, this is a guy who, you know, once was kind of like the master, right? I never bought it, but, you know, would come up with nicknames. He doesn't have that touch anymore, right? It feels like, you know, the old guy is just, you know, reaching back, throwing spaghetti and ketchup against the wall. But I'm guessing that most people are looking at that tweet and going, you know, are they going to get this guy help? Is there something going on with him? Because this certainly does not sound like somebody who is doing well or is feeling confident. So whatever concerns you might have about the Democratic ticket, this is important to sort of take a deep breath and say, meanwhile, over here, the former president of the United States is losing his freaking mind.
With us now, NBC News correspondent Garrett Haake with Senator Vance in Shelby Township, Michigan, and Mark Short, former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence. So, Garrett, what did we hear from Vance this morning?
Well, Jose, this event just concluded a short time ago. You can see I'm actually standing in front of a police station. There was a heavy focus here on law and order issues, really kind of the bread and butter campaign issues that the Trump campaign likes to talk about, immigration, how it's related to crime. Vance hit those points on the nose. Then he took a number of questions from reporters that covered the gamut, everything from the campaign's reaction to the vice presidential running mate pick from Kamala Harris yesterday to defending the comments that Donald Trump made on stage at the NABJ last week. And he took a question about Tim Walz that he used to pivot to what I think is going to become an increasing attack line from the Trump campaign, criticizing Walz, who served for decades in the National Guard, for retiring from the Guard before his unit was deployed to Iraq. Here's what Vance said about that just a few moments ago.
Well, I wonder, Tim Walz, when were you ever in war? What was this weapon that you carried into war, given that you abandoned your unit right before they went to Iraq, and he has not spent a day in a combat zone? What bothers me about Tim Walz is the stolen valor garbage. Do not pretend to be something that you're not.
Now, the Republican ticket has just sort of started rolling out this attack this morning, Jose, but I would not be surprised if we don't hear it amplified significantly by other Republican veterans. Of course, J.D. Vance served in the Marines, other Republican lawmakers, to try to take what is a strength, at least on paper, of the running mate Tim Walz and turn it into a weakness by getting folks to talk about his military service, not in an admiring way, but to question why he wasn't deployed overseas into an actual war zone.
Mark, what do you think of that line of criticism against the governor of Minnesota?
Well, look, J.D. Vance served in the Marines. I think he's entitled to make that attack. But I do think that in the last 3 weeks, there's obviously been enormous upheaval in all of this and in the polls. But prior to Biden withdrawing, I think one of the biggest vulnerabilities for Democrats was the border and the economy. And I think that's still the case. And I think that, unfortunately, much of the Trump campaign continues to be personal, whether or not it's questioning Kamala Harris's heritage or this attack or, frankly, going to Georgia and deciding to attack very popular Republican governors. So I think that Harris and Walz have enormous vulnerabilities on their record and some of their very progressive positions they've taken. And I think a policy attack, would be more effective, perhaps, than some of the personal attacks that have been transpiring.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett, Senator Vance's schedule, meanwhile, mirrors kind of that of Vice President Harris and her new running mate. What's the strategy behind this? Are they following each other here?
Yeah, Jose, to Mark's point, I've heard this from so many Republicans practically begging Donald Trump and his campaign to just focus on the policy, that they think there's such fertile ground here to turn off voters in the middle who might not like a more progressive Democratic ticket if they can just stay focused on that issue. That's what Vance was trying to do here today, again, with kind of law and order remarks here in Michigan. He's going to Wisconsin later today, where he's expected to talk about inflation and the economy. This is old-fashioned bracketing. This is a way to, at relatively low cost, force your candidate, your ticket, into the conversation with a special focus on local news. Just for example, at this event here, Vance took perhaps a dozen questions from reporters. He made sure to call on every single local news outlet from here in the Detroit metro area before calling on national news reporters. That's still where most people get their news, even their political news. And to insert yourself into the story in that way on the same day that the top of the other ticket's going to be here, it's good, just cheap, smart, tactical retail politicking.
Yeah, and so, Garrett, this issue that Vance mentioned about what he called stolen valor, that wasn't part of the scripted aspect of this campaign stop. Rather, this was a question that he answered?
Well, it was interesting, Jose. It was a pivot off of a question that he had taken. I think it was a scripted answer in the sense that this was clearly something the Trump campaign had discussed. This was something that Vance wanted to make sure he got out. It wasn't part of his prepared remarks, but he took a question that was tangentially related to Walz and turned it onto this topic very intentionally, trying to get this attack line out there.
So, Mark, is this something that, knowing Donald Trump and the way he campaigns and his, what he says, is there any possibility, you think, that the attacks would be limited going forward on policy versus personal attacks in that political world, Mark?
I think there have been short periods where it's been more disciplined and focused on policy, but it's hard to see that that's been the track record or necessarily forecast that's what it's going to be for the next 90 days. But I think Garrett's reporting makes the larger point here. You're in an event for law enforcement. I think there's enormous vulnerability for Governor Walz regarding the BLM riots and the chaos that descended on Minneapolis. But instead, the story today will be attacking a service of 24 years in the National Guard. And maybe they have polling that says that's a vulnerability. But to me, it seems like you have a great message on law enforcement, and you're stepping on that accidentally.
Less than 24 hours after the hard launch of the Kamala Harris-Tim Walz ticket, the stark choice facing American voters in November is coming into even sharper focus. On the one hand, the joyful, electric, happy warrior, massive crowd-sized vibes of Vice President Kamala Harris and her newly minted running mate Tim Walz, who are at this hour blazing a path through battleground states. Fresh off last night's mega rally in Philadelphia, they are boots on the ground in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That rally will be swiftly followed by another one in Detroit later tonight. 3 rallies in 24 hours. More than 14,000 people in attendance last night in Philadelphia alone, 12,000 in Wisconsin this afternoon. Donations poured in at an average of $3 million an hour right after Tim Walz was named to the ticket. As of today, the Harris-Walz campaign has raised $36 million and counting since he joined the ticket. But it's more than just numbers. There is something organic and infectious at the grassroots level that is happening. A party seemingly united and fired up and determined to win. Just listen to this from a few minutes ago.
I want to bring greetings from our incredible President, Joe Biden. He loves Wisconsin. He loves Wisconsin. And I know we are all deeply grateful for his lifetime of service to our nation and for all he continues to do. That's right. That's right. I'm going to tell him what you said.
We hope he was watching that. The crowd spontaneously, in an unscripted moment, erupting in a chorus that grew louder and louder of "Thank you, Joe." And while Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are injecting this much-needed dose of joy into the race, the disgraced, twice impeached, 4 times indicted, found liable for sexual abuse and criminally convicted of 34 felony counts ex-president and his number 2 are offering something that is not that. While Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are lighting up battleground states with Beyonce playing and mega crowds in attendance, Donald Trump is hunkered down at Mar-a-Lago, off the campaign trail until Friday, reverting to his old tricks, hurling incoherent slurs and pileups of insults. Stuff like this, quote, Mr. Trump, in a phone call this morning to Fox and Friends, described Ms. Harris as a nasty person and her and Mr. Walz as communists. And maybe we shouldn't be surprised that Donald Trump's muscle memory is kicking in and he's reverting to his greatest hits of misogyny and divisiveness. Because in the past 24 hours, with the addition of Tim Walz to the Democratic ticket, the Earth 1, Earth 2 split screen of the choice now facing Americans is impossible to ignore. As veteran Democratic strategist, now an advisor to the Harris-Walz campaign, David Plouffe, put it this morning on Morning Joe.
Tim Walz is normal, mainstream, and happy. And J.D. Vance is weird, extreme, and angry. And I really do think, listen, policy matters a great amount. What you're going to do for the country from an issue standpoint matters a great amount. But also that visual presentation, I think, of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, as they love America. They love people. They know our better days are ahead and we can tackle these challenges. And these other 2 folks in Trump and Vance are the angriest ticket in American political history.
The angriest ticket in American political history. It's an incredible branding effort, and some would argue it is also the lowest energy ticket in modern history. Good luck beating this turbocharged, joyful, and refreshingly normal opponent with what you're offering. It's where we start today with Battleground States Director for the Harris-Walz campaign, Dan Cannon. Thank you so much for being here. I know a little bit from my time on campaigns that you have one of the busiest jobs, so we appreciate you taking time out to do this. I know it's usually delegated to the comm staff, so it's great to get to talk to you. Tell me the plan. It feels like right now you have not pent-up energy, you have sort of right out of the chute all this energy, you have all these people, you have more people than it seems like you have tickets for these events. How do you sustain that? How do you deploy your two very popular candidates?
It's a great question. I mean, I think the thing that I've been talking about this campaign since the beginning, Nicole, is that we're going to have 7 very close states, more states we compete in certainly, but 7 that are just true toss-ups in this election. And we've been building campaigns and an infrastructure in those states from the beginning, designed to win a close race, designed to mobilize voters, to have offices, to have a presence in community, to engage people. And that infrastructure has been built. And so when the vice president was endorsed by the president a couple weeks ago, we already had that coming weekend, 2,300 events planned in battleground states. And so when that incredible enthusiasm came over and it was huge and palpable and real, it had a place for it to go. It wasn't just a fire with newspaper. It was a fire built with some real sturdy logs to keep the flame going. And that's what we have to do, is find a place for folks to come in, to continue to engage them, to have them bring in their own friends and neighbors and other volunteers, and to create voter contact opportunities and make this a community event, something that they are a part of. That was what we did in Obama in the 08 campaign, the 12 campaign, and I think we're replicating that to a great degree right now with this campaign.
I want to talk to you about Pennsylvania, because I feel like something that people get wrong in the analysis, even the most generous analysis of the addition of Governor Walz to the ticket, is that you would have just stationed Josh Shapiro in his home state if he'd been tapped. He, too, would have been barnstorming the country. And I wonder if you could sort of articulate how someone in your job deploys your candidate and your vice president. I mean, my understanding, and I haven't done this for 20 years, but it's like the county you go into, how many people you need to reach, how many people you need to motivate, how many people you need to persuade, how many people you need to convert. Just talk about how targeted this effort will be, not just in Pennsylvania, but across those 7 states.
Sure. I mean, I'll look at Wisconsin right here. So we're in the Blue Wall today. You're in Eau Claire, a town of 71,000 people in a Republican congressional district. Western Wisconsin, it's more rural than urban, obviously. But 12,000 people are out there today to watch Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have that positive vision that David Plouffe mentioned. And it really is a joyful campaign that does get tough and have contrast where we need to and establish the stakes. But you can run a political campaign that does find joy and connection with people. But it is to your point, Nicole, it has to be targeted. We have to go to the states that we know are on the pathway to 270. Obviously, Michigan and Wisconsin, and of course, Pennsylvania, as you mentioned, very important, but also Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona and Nevada. And within all those states, there are different issues that matter locally. And the teams we built on the ground, more than 260 offices in all those states, more than 1,400 staff in all those states. There's the principal travel that you're seeing right now, which is obviously where a lot of the spotlight goes. But with all those events I mentioned earlier, with surrogates, with local validators, with just neighbors and volunteers doing voter contact, you have a presence everywhere you need to, and you can establish messages and community events that are focused and authentic to the kind of conversation happening in those communities.
The youth vote was, for my old party, sort of a mirage. It's a really real thing for your party. So the plan of exciting them and motivating it is probably 40%, and then turning them out to vote, making sure if they're going off to college, they're registered and they're able to do that, probably the other 60%. And correct me if I have any of that wrong. But this seems like explosive, really almost historic. I'm sure you're looking back at 08 for the right comparisons of excitement in a part of the vote that you can't manufacture. I mean, the youth vote is either there for you or it's really, really hard. And it's clearly there for Vice President Harris and for Governor Walz. Tell me the plan, and tell me how much attention and focus is on turning them out as voters.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great youth program here that we run on the campaign that engages folks and has throughout the campaign. But as we head into the fall, as you mentioned, Nicole, with the college campuses coming back online, it's another great opportunity to have a shot in the arm. But the thing I'll say about young voters, and young voters are not just college kids, they're voters under 30, right, who maybe are starting a family or trying to start a family or worried about some of the key issues that are just like the issues the rest of America faces. They do care about issues. They care about climate change. They care about cost. They care about, having safe communities. They care about gun violence prevention. They care about the things that this campaign believes in and talks about all the time. And to David Plouffe's point, they don't want a campaign that is denigrating America itself, denigrating the people in America, and being mean. They want a campaign they can feel a part of something. And I think we've created that with this ticket and with the momentum you're seeing. But with that youth vote and with all the other coalitions we're trying to keep together, we need all of that, because despite the enthusiasm, and it's wonderful, it's great, it's palpable, the races are still going to be very, very close. There's some political gravity in this country that we have to recognize. And so all of this, to me, is additive to our path to victory, but doesn't predict a path to victory. We have to do the hard work and continue to mobilize folks to win these tight races across all the battlegrounds.
Every year, about 2 million Americans serve in the armed forces, either full-time or 1 week in a month. They come from all walks of life, all serve in different ways. Many serve as Senator J.D. Vance did after high school. He signed up for a 4-year enlistment in the Marines, including 6 months in Iraq doing public affairs. He was then honorably discharged. Now, we should say that's a bit of a rarity among politicians. Most politicians serve as officers after college. They don't enlist after high school, because serving as an officer after college means better pay, better benefits. And there's a little bit of a division between officers and the enlisted in the armed forces. But there's an experience that is even rarer among the tiny fraction of Americans who enlist. A much smaller share make a career of it, serving 20 years or more with multiple deployments. And only a tiny fraction of those fought to stay in the service after being disabled on the job. And one of them is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, an enlisted soldier in the National Guard for nearly a quarter of a century. A journey that began on a Nebraska farm as soon as he was eligible to join.
My father served during Korean War, and the day after I turned 17, he took me down to an Army National Guard recruiter, and I raised my hand and signed up.
That was in 1981. Ronald Reagan was the president. Now, Walz continued to serve for the next 24 years under 4 commanders-in-chief. He spent most of that time as an artillery soldier, and it took a toll on his hearing. In fact, in 2002, after he'd already done 20 years, he qualified for retirement. A medical board considered discharging him because of his hearing impairment. Instead, he convinced him to let him complete his final enlistment, which began after 9/11. Walz achieved the highest enlisted rank in the Army, Command Sergeant Major. But rather than stay in and complete the schooling for that rank, Walz retired in 2005 at the rank of Master Sergeant. Party says because he wanted, at that point, to speak freely about political injustice, specifically the Iraq War. The following year, he was one of more than 60 anti-war veterans running for Congress as the Fighting Dems, a group that included Jim Webb, Patrick Murphy, and Tammy Duckworth.
I spent 24 years in the Army National Guard. I spent the better part of 2 decades as a public school teacher. I'm a small business owner, I'm a father, and I'm a husband. I intend to come here to Washington to provide authentic leadership and to truly represent the people of my district and the people of the United States.
After a surprise victory in a red district, Walz became the highest-ranking enlisted veteran ever to serve in Congress and worked to help end the military's anti-gay, don't ask, don't tell policy.
I had students that I taught in the classroom, coached on the football field, trained in my Guard unit, and they went off to Iraq to fight for this nation. They went off to Afghanistan to fight for this nation. Not once in my career did the question of sexual orientation ever come up. It's time to erase this this mistake for our security and for Americans, and I'll be with you every step of the way.
After Donald Trump was elected president, Walz became the ranking Democrat on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. He fought the Trump White House plans for privatizing veterans' health care while using his own experiences with the VA to help other veterans get their benefits. Walz's experience in the armed forces is an atypical one for most Americans, particularly for politicians at the national level. I mean, there really is literally no one like him. And now Walz is running with Kamala Harris against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And Perhaps not that surprisingly, Republicans are trying to swift vote Walz, denigrating his service the way they did with Vietnam vet John Kerry 20 years ago, saying he stole valor and left the army to avoid going to Iraq. It's a playbook Republicans also used against Walz when he ran for governor of Minnesota, and it failed then because they're lies. It turns out when voters hear about the quarter-century Walz spent as a citizen soldier, the time he spent since then fighting for Iraq and Afghanistan veterans to get the benefits they deserve, they don't see what Republicans do. They see a rare kind of veteran in politics who can cut through the self-serving BS rather than adding to it.
I want to bring in Symone Sanders Townsend, former chief spokesperson for Vice President Harris, co-host of MSNBC's The Weekend. Also with me, Elise Jordan, former aide to the President George W. Bush White House and State Department, also an MSNBC political analyst. I don't know, Symone, is mind your own damn business the new bumper sticker message that we're going to see on the Harris website? What do you make of this Tim Walz, including, by the way, clapping for himself? He gets so into the crowd, he claps for himself.
Governor Walz is actually originally from Nebraska, and as a native Nebraskan myself, a North Omahaan, that is very Nebraska nice of him. The clapping for oneself, it's endearing, I believe. Look, when it comes to, it's interesting, you know, the bumper sticker, right? It made me think of Governor Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, and when she ran her first race for Michigan, her gubernatorial race, her tagline was "Fix the damn roads," and it seemed quite simple, and it spoke to something everyone in Michigan could identify with, the roads, whether you're talking about in your city roads or you're driving on the highway. She wants to fix the damn roads. And it was endearing. It was straightforward. I think mind your own dang on business is right along that line. And it doesn't just speak to what is happening in the reproductive front, not just in some of the battleground states, but truly across the country. It speaks to folks and their children, right? It talks about its health care. It is education. You know, the mind your own business can go to so many different things. It is right in line with the freedom messaging that the vice president has been championing, frankly, since Dobbs was overturned. And I do think that is something that is going to speak across demographics and to voters who don't like what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are selling.
Elise, Walz has, I think, a particular skill set, which seems to be delivering a kind of a devastating line with humor. Take a listen to this.
He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Do you think, Elise, that pointed, clever, can compete with the grievance politics of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance?
Yes, Chris, I do, because it's good television. It's entertaining. And that, at the end of the day, is what drew so many voters back in 2016 to Donald Trump when he was the political new thing. And now he's not anymore. It's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz who are driving the conversation, who are front and center in media coverage. And they look like they're having a lot of fun doing it, too. And I think that's key. There's a sense of joy, a playfulness. It's not, doom and gloom and the democracy message of if they don't win, democracy is going to die. It's just these people, get them out of your lives, get government out of your life. And like Symone was saying, that has the ability to, to reverberate between different sectors of the electorate who don't want the government in their lives. And it's kind of hilarious that they've managed to turn that message against Republicans who previously were not for government intervention in the minute facets of your life.
Symone, there are the words you say on the trail, and then there's also, right, the way you say them, your persona. And, Elise called it, he seemed to be having a lot of fun, joy. I thought as I was watching last night, he seemed delighted to be on that stage. It's not a word you hear a lot anymore. And some folks are calling what he has big dad energy. Does that somehow make his attack lines even more potent?
I think so. Look, I think it is. It's the fact that it is matter of fact, if you will. Voters across the board, look, winning campaigns are campaigns that are about the future, are campaigns that are about hope, are campaigns that give people something to vote for, not just someone, but a vision, something people can see and can get behind. And the thing about Governor Walz is that he does seem very endearing. If you've ever, and I've had the opportunity to, chat with and speak to the governor a number of times. And the last time I saw him, it's just like, you forget that this man is the governor of Minnesota. He's like, oh, I love, he watches the network. He loves the show. I tried to live book him actually in that last interaction. And he seems like such maybe a regular person is the line to use. And I think that's part of the reason he and the vice president connected. Obviously, Governor Walz is currently the chair of the Democratic Governors Association, to be determined if he is going to step down from that role over the next 90 days and continue while he campaigns for the vice presidency, if you will, with Vice President Harris. But as the chair of the Democratic Governors Association, he had interactions, obviously, with other governors across the country, with the president and vice president regularly. And Governor Walz and the vice president, they knew one another. But it's my understanding when she sat down to have her one-on-one interview with him, it was the chemistry, the endearing nature, the way that he talked about the role of a vice president. It felt like to the vice president that they were on the same page, and he was someone that she could work with for the next 4, maybe even 8 years. And I think that's what it came down to for the vice president. And one may think that might be what it comes down to for the voters.
And Elise, at one point last night, Tim Walz shared the story of how his children were conceived through IVF, kind of his real life experience, adding to Harris's high-profile defense of reproductive rights. We know that she has been the spokesperson for this administration. And I'm wondering how you see that playing out on the campaign trail and maybe, if it actually happens, on the debate stage.
This is a terrible issue for Donald Trump. He is the president who is known as taking away women's reproductive freedom, and that he is part of an effort. He has a vice president who's even more draconian than he is, and they want to do even more to restrict your reproductive freedom. And so voters know that Kamala Harris has been out there on this issue. When I was in Wisconsin and talking to Democrats, they were excited that she would be elevated to this role because it also meant that she could draw more attention to women's health and access to health care in the country. So anything they do to draw that contrast to keeping the government out of your doctor's office versus sending doctors to prison for performing healthcare procedures is good. That's a great contrast for the independent swing voters that Kamala Harris needs to win.
Elise Jordan, Symone Sanders Townsend, love having both of you on the program.